We're happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, everyone. I know it was kind of hard waking up this morning, and especially with the weather, right? And I had a hard time. It's so beautiful outside, but I am glad to be here with you. Like she mentioned, I am a 20-year plus veteran in financial services. Namely, I've had various leadership roles at Wachovia, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, to name a few. And my work has spanned risk management and strategy. So I'm excited to be here. And when I was first contacted by the group, the organization, to present, I said to myself, I asked what you all wanted me to present on, and it said strategic project management. And I said to myself, well, I'm not PMI certified. And I know that you all work hard in your professional development to become proficient at what you do. So I said to myself, what can I share with you all to provide some insight into this very important topic? And I thought through my career, and although early on and throughout the majority of my career, I have not been a technical project. I have led and managed strategic initiatives that span large, complex organizations. So with that, and also I've managed projects myself, and I've managed project management. So with that, I want to share with you some of my insights and experiences, and later on in the presentation, I'm going to walk you through an enterprise initiative that I led that I think you'll find very interesting that applies to strategic project management. What is strategic project management? And I searched the net and trying to figure out where I could find the perfect example of what strategic project management is. In your minds, can someone give me what their understanding or their thoughts on what strategic project management is?
It's defining a strategy. Is that phase where you're actually thinking about building a strategy to lead the project.
Okay. And I'm going to make this very interactive, okay? So this is going to be a dialogue because I know there's a lot of experience in the room. Any other thoughts?
I think it's road mapping. It's really understanding where you want to be in 5, 10 years, whatever, and building the plan to get there.
Yeah, you have a vision and then you sort of take it from there.
But understanding what needs to happen in order for that to occur. That's the strategic project management. You're taking the strategy and you're putting it into place. Back to your roadmap.
And why is a roadmap important?
It tells us where we can, it's a direction the organization is going.
Yeah, those are steps that lead you.
Okay. This is a bit esoteric, but I thought that it captures the essence of what strategic project management is. Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir man's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high, in hope and work, remembering that a noble, logical diagram, once recorded, will never die. Okay, this goes back to your point about the roadmap.
You guys are in trouble, Joel.
So, when I think about strategic project management, there are 4 questions that must be answered. 1, what are we trying to accomplish? How will we measure? How do we get there? And what other conditions must exist? Where in your minds do organizations fail most when it comes to these 4 questions?
First 4.
Any other thoughts?
How do we get there?
When you say how do we get there, what do you mean?
The roadmap steps, right?
So
we have this nice vision, and we fail to build a plan.
Okay.
On achieving that goal.
Okay. Yeah, these are the 4 questions here, and again, I'm going to share with you an example. This is a real life example. This is not a case book. Something I took from Harvard Business Review. This is something that I lived and breathed for 2.5 years. Okay, investment rationalization. What is investment rationalization? It is a capability that merges change management, project management, and also private equity concepts. And I'm going to get around to why private equity comes into play here. Can anybody just give a guess? Anybody know anything about private equity? To get a project approved in private, to get an effort approved in private equity, talk about what happens. Do you know what happens? Anybody?
So when you say private equity, are you saying capital expenditure, or what are you?
I'm talking about private equity.
Private equity, money.
Money, yes. When people, hedge funds invest in an idea, can you imagine the level of scrutiny that goes into screening and approving a project?
ROI.
Bingo.
About the return on the investment.
Bingo.
How fast and how much?
Bingo. Now, do you understand why private equity comes into play when we think about project management? How much rigor and discipline is put into understanding the benefits of a project? It varies. Business unit, organization, it varies. So we leverage private equity. And it talks about transparency. We talk about transparency and accountability. Now, this project and initiative was something that was brought to us by an organization that implemented this at American Express. Ken Chenault implemented the same effort. So, again, we lacked accountability, discipline, and oversight. Projects were delayed, over budget, and presented risk to the organization. Low priority projects consume critical resources. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Underlying these critical challenges were leadership behaviors and an organizational culture that reinforced bad behavior. Okay, it took about 3 years to implement this enterprise-wide. But in 12 months, we took an overall portfolio from $2.6 billion to $1.1 billion. And it was instituted enterprise-wide at the end of those 3 years. Okay, why we needed it? This is the rate in which the projects were being approved. Okay, in 2003, 671, 2004, in 2005, almost $3 billion. And look at the pie. Infrastructure, cost reduction, revenue generation, and risk and regulatory. Now, today, right, this risk and regulatory would be different. I didn't get a chance to include some quotes on what we did was we interviewed stakeholders about this whole effort. And I'm just going to read to you, and I didn't get a chance to incorporate these slides there. So, some of the quotes. Scope. Now, a strategic investment was one we identified was $250,000 and above. So here's a quote and a question. Scope should increase visibility into all investments. Projects under $250 should be included, though a different process may exist. Incorporate all discretionary capital decisions. Here's a leader. I try to divide my projects in a manner that keeps them under the $250,000. Another quote, screening should consider multiple elements, fit with strategy, financial performance, ROI, capacity constraints and functions, execution plan, and management track record. Investment process needs to consider human capital and ROI. Project evaluation should have a clear link to strategy and should prioritize all projects on financial value centered. And there's one more quote I wanted to share with you. Our screening process is more about horse trading and politics than it is about financial merit of the project. So, we evaluated 600 initiatives over a span of time. Now, this effort was, especially with the strategic projects, was evaluated and screened on the operating committee level. So the CEO's direct reports. During this time period, we had approved up to 600 projects. Can anyone give me a guess on how many projects were declined out of 600?
0.
1. 1 with this kind of spend. Again, this is something I know is very familiar with all of you. We evaluate where the spend was occurring. 90 to 95% of projects, where was the capacity absorbed? On those projects that weren't even strategic priority projects, 10 to 15% of resources went to those projects. Why? Someone mentioned in the session before, you have the business units, right? And each business unit leader, or no matter where the business unit, is called the friends and family, right? You call them the technology, you call them the operations, and what? They do your work because of relationships, etc. So, to only 10% of projects were being consumed here by these resources. The majority of resources were consumed in technology with projects that were small, that were non-EPO. So if I'm an executive and I'm leading a major business division, my strategic priorities weren't even being considered. And they were bogged down and they were delayed as a result of this graphic here.
What was EPO? What does that mean?
Enterprise Project Office. So the Enterprise Project Office, you would send all of these $250,000 projects to the EPO. And they would prepare for the committee to approve them. Yeah.
So it's like the old joke of, can handle all the big projects, there just aren't any.
Right. But more so, there was a lack of rigor and discipline. Everybody wanted their projects done, and however, when it came to the execution and what was being executed, the people who were approving them, they thought they were going to have their projects implemented and have priority, but they would be consumed by lesser prioritized projects. So when we talk about private equity, and going back to why private equity, disciplined asset allocation. When we look at that pie, they pay particular attention to that pie. Target limited alignment with strategic priorities. That's what we had in corporations. This is what happens in organizations, many organizations. Diversity, risk across portfolio, project-based assessment. Project selection, high rejection rate. Funds less than 1% of proposal in private equity. In organization, approved burning platform, mandatory. Forecasts not rigorously tested. On the private equity side, intense investment screening. Rigorous market assessment, forecast here could apply, management capability critical. Maturity of investments, forecast payback timing years. And then project management. You all are very familiar with this. Milestone-based funding. Lifetime funding commitment assumed up front. Exogenous factors to drive holdback. Individual accountability and incentives. No direct linkage between project management performance and compensation of future capital pool.
No skin in the game.
None. Many projects still rated red, yellow within 8 months of funding. How are we successful? How does this happen? Crisis management and private equity management consumes most fund partner exit or resolve quickly.
You don't have any post-implementation audit on those?
On those projects?
Yes.
When we implement it?
Yeah, well, I mean, In order to make sure you're getting the
Bingo.
20% of equity, I mean, the metrics, you need to go back and audit.
We discovered that when people would come and get the funding, they'd walk away. I'm talking about $1 million, $2 million. Not only that, talk about portfolio allocation. We had efforts. So if we had a trading floor in the investment bank area and we had a trading floor in the retail trading side, they'd be asking for the same capability. No one was talking to each other. Why couldn't we leverage? So understanding what's in the portfolio and taking a more holistic view from an enterprise perspective was very important. Okay? Here are some of the findings. No formal process to ensure alignment of capital allocation with corporate priorities. Limited visibility into strategic directives which do not cascade to the entire organization. How many of you all understand this and feel this in your organization? Do you know exactly how what you're working on ties in with the strategic direction? This is important. Investment screening, we talked about portfolio management, and going back to what you said, tracking of project performance and delivery of expected benefits almost non-existent. Limited tracking of spent dollars and their usage. So what would happen? A typical example is a CIO or a division leader would get their funding for an investment. They wouldn't leverage, they wouldn't utilize or consume that investment. What would they do? So you know how corporations work. Sometimes when their earnings pressures, you go to expense. And what happens? Some of these folk have dollars that were supposed to be utilized in one of those 5 buckets, and they put it on the table. So you had this shell game going on occurring. And then operational excellence. This is something that's overlooked. Efficiency, redundant processes, systems, results in suboptimal utilization and process burden. Redundancy. Do you all feel that sometimes in your organizations? So the next generation was to address all of these elements, okay? To have, so we, at the BU level, you align prioritization, and then also at the central level, you improve capabilities around execution and screening. But again, milestone-based funding, we implemented milestone-based funding with capital release explicitly linked to project performance. Anybody has that occurring in your organization? I want to hear, do you see the benefit of that? How is it done today in your organizations?
Upfront funding.
In the annual budget, but then you have toll gates. Yep. And unless you fail that toll gate miserably, you know the money's there for the next toll gate.
So do you evaluate? So meeting a toll gate, does that mean how successful, does that measure how successful a project is really tracking?
How predictable is the pace? It also says how predictable is the pace.
Okay.
For example, if say 10%, I'm going to pay you up. So you can also make your cash flow more deterministic by having milestones.
Okay.
I think there's a certain degree of progressive elaboration. You get to, we've done the design, and we said it was going to be $1 million, but it's actually going to be $3 million. It's going to take 2.5 years, not a year.
Right.
Am I understanding this right? The bottom bullet under accountability is depending on the performance of the project portfolio is how they're going to get paid.
Yeah.
People doing it are going to get paid.
Scan it in. And think about this, especially on the business, and I don't know what your incentive plans are, but if you are engaged with an enterprise or a strategic priority, why shouldn't there be a linkage?
But what I'm seeing is they do their projects, they do their programs. It doesn't matter if it tanks; they're still getting their stuff. There's
no skin in the game.
Right. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
They're still going to get what they want, even though they're not
linked
They're not linked. They say they're linked,
But they're not
but they're
linked.
really
They're
not linked.
The status quo.
Yes,
Are you talking about the project team, or are you talking about the business sponsor who's asking for it?
both.
As a project team, you come in with the charter, whether that, here's what you've got to deliver and you expect to pay back. You go through the toll gates, you design, you come up with your requirements, the design. If that does everything the business has asked you for, but it doesn't deliver the market response they expected, is that your issue as a project team? You did what they asked you to do, or is it their issue as a business partner? You executed perfectly.
And no, I think there are circumstances, especially with what we're dealing with here, is what if a project is delayed, for example, and there are implications as to customer implications, operational implications. To your point, how are you being evaluated based on that delay, whether it's a 6-month delay, whether it's an 8-month delay, 12, and what impact does that have from a financial perspective to the organization? I think that's where, to your point, if a project team or project manager is meeting all of the requirements, right? I understand your point. However, there are instances where you do not, and it's very clear as a sponsor and as a team that you are not meeting those requirements. Any other questions?
So this is where the risk comes to play, right? So,
Yes.
So you, at the get-go, you identify all the issues that could come, could not come, and then if it's a new risk, then you didn't assess correctly, or that's what you're saying.
Yeah, partly. The objectives. We're talking about accountability to provide adequate transparency and accountability across all aspects of it. Improve quality of investment decision by increasing individual and business unit accountability. Reduce exposure from failing projects by gating funding decisions. Leverage increased transparency to aid the development of talent and leadership skills. Let's talk about that. How many have you seen in your organizations some of the most critical projects and initiatives being assigned to people who have a miserable track record or a questionable track record? Why? Anyone want to talk about this? This is important.
I was told that he had better leadership skills. I have yet to see them. I've been told he has them.
They had capacity to work.
They're not doing anything.
They're not doing anything else.
That's right.
I'm going to tell you,
They're terrible.
you know how we leverage this? So at most organizations, you have your succession planning, right? And you've identified key talent. What we would do was, if we saw someone who's up and coming and had strong leadership skills, management skills, we would put them in an effort to see how they would do. So that's how you would develop your talent. That was a part of the talent development process. Balance execution capacity and risk by taking a portfolio view. Reduce execution delays and improve flexibility to react to market changes. And so another thing I want to talk about here is execution and priority. I think someone mentioned about prioritization, and I think you're talking about roadmap. Roadmap is all about sequencing and priority, and also about organizational bandwidth. How many of you feel overwhelmed? And how strategic is the organization in evaluating that pie of projects and understanding which areas in the organization are being stretched? Any of you all experience this? Process efficiency, again, ensuring that process efficiency, you don't become too bureaucratic with your processes, and that's what we wanted to do. This is something that many organizations struggle with when it comes to executing on strategic priority. And it goes back to this roadmap and sequencing the processes. Everybody understands what needs to be done, but how you get it done is often the biggest challenge. Again, it's not just the X's and O's, but how do you build excitement? How do you engage? How do you communicate? How you empower? And how you capture and consolidate wins. Any of your organizations struggle with this? Talk to me. Someone talk to me about how you do this or don't do this, and what's the impact.
The company I currently work for does not believe in the project bonding and supporting the team building. It's just not the culture. So you do lose a little bit.
You do
in the rally and the resources.
And you know what we did here? To your point, you saw the problems, right? The set of problems. How many project managers, effective project managers, knew those problems? Do you think? When there's a problem, these set of problems, don't you all know?
Yes, we do.
So think about if you can harness the excitement around saying, hey, we're actually going to do something about this. So what we did was we had a roadshow throughout the execution and implementation of this project, where we would go to groups of project managers across business units, and we'd talk about the project and get the input.
Coming back to her point, what I have experienced is within the same business unit, one PNL can have a different culture than another PNL. And one of the things I have learned out of that is the PNL is a reflection of the customers, the cluster of customers who are paying. So the same business went to another PNL, it doesn't manifest the same way as it would in the other PNL. So the leader in the other PNL was one factor changing it, and then the other is also the reflection of the customer. So coming back to your point, you can motivate and change the thing, but at the same time, you have to do it externally in the customer side as well, because they are also setting the demand.
I hear you. I would also bring this point of view or perspective. Okay. Now I know we all have our personal ambitions and agendas, but one thing I know about project managers across business units, whether you're in a business unit, technology operations, you want things done the right way. You want discipline, you want methodology, you want clarity, and so those things bring you together, regardless of the business unit culture. People in capital markets, when we were talking to people in capital markets, and you know those guys don't care. But those project managers who had to really work with the business unit and ensure that they had to follow methodology, they were concerned. And there was a spirit of camaraderie with people in the general bank, etc. So those things bring you together, regardless of the culture. Any other thoughts?
How you were at Wachovia. I was at the Red, White, Blue Bank across the street for about 11 years. How do you think the whole contracting mindset? I'm sorry, was that an elephant I just pointed out?
For those of us not in the industry, I have no idea what you're talking about.
The bank's
staff augmentation, right?
Yeah.
So what's
Contract people in.
Yeah, you're in for 6 months, you're in for a year as a PM.
Got it.
You raise an interesting. I mean, that's the elephant. Okay, and let me be clear. I have nothing wrong. There's nothing against contracting, but because of the market and where we are, the slow in tech growth occurring right now, organizations don't want to invest, and so the solution is to bring in the temporary work resources. That's a reality. Now, going back to your point is, do I, as a contractor, have a vested interest? Now, I would say I've met a lot of contractors who take an interest and act as stewards, but I've met a lot of contractors who don't. So to your point, that does impact this. I guess that was.
They don't have the organizational knowledge. You know, the contacts, knowing who to call, where to call, what the process is, how it was developed a year or two ago. So they're coming in, here's your $1.5 million project, because you seem like a sharp person, you know, who worked for whatever companies in the past. But you're responsible for all these risks, and you don't know anything about how this place operates. You've got to come up with a speed and manage a project effectively, knowing all these organizational concerns and whatnot, and strategic roadmaps.
And coupled with that, often leaders and managers often take the short view. So to your point, if I'm a leader or a manager, instead of just checking off the boxes, I want to ensure I take the long view, and I want to set them up for success, etc. I want to enable them. And you have a lot of that occurring now.
Especially with long-term contracts, like even if the PMs are there for long-term contract, 18 months, then you get that time to build, to learn, to establish those connections, and then pick up the project that was not working, and then turn things around and then bring that back to where we are.
And I would say, as a contractor, it's a mistake if you don't give that context.
Yeah.
Because usually that institutional knowledge is there. What you're bringing in is what you don't have, or we're at the company. You're trying to bring in the skill set that you don't have. If you do have it, it's being overlooked, that's a whole other problem.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, you're bringing in project management expertise because you need that help.
Most definitely.
Something else I was going to say is that for large cross-functional projects, I'm seeing a real struggle with leadership these days.
In the organization.
In the organization, you've got multiple interests, and this might be getting at what the gentleman down the road was saying. You've got multiple vested interests. You don't seem to have one person that has the ability to make a decision. When you use the PM, you need to escalate an issue, and you need a resolution. I've been sitting for a month and a half right now because I can't seem to get the right folks to get together in a room and make a decision. And that's up to time.
So, curious, do you find that happening now since the market implosion? Do you find more of that now versus before 2008?
Yes, absolutely.
But Joel, I don't know if it's maybe. I see it as a function of size as well, because at the banks, at New Power, there seems to be a tipping point in terms of size where you have leaders who have the ability to take it on and go get resolved for you, whereas in larger organizations, it's hard. It's hard for them, just like it's hard for me.
It's also interesting, as you were saying, to compare the different organizations. I've been, at Capital One, Fannie Mae, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and to see the leadership models in each of those organizations. And by far, Capital One had the best organizational model and had leadership that would make decisions as compared to the other organizations that I've seen.
Yeah, but your point is well taken. I think that it is an issue. It is a big challenge. And I've noticed since 2008, you have, because you have the contracting, the temporary phenomenon, but you had so many leaders were sucked out of organizations. And I think that impacts. It has. It has impacted. And this is just how we sequenced the effort. Going again to execution. I only have 10 minutes, so.
What is the last part?
Pardon?
Institutionalization.
Institutionalization, yeah. This is just talking about how we did it. A gradual approach to change, high sustained frequency of interactions with all stakeholders. I want to show you that. So let me see here. This is what we would do. So operating committee members, key stakeholders, working team, extend. Because think about this. A lot of people have to share and give up control. So how do you get everybody to buy into a set of core principles? So this is the type of communication and touch points we had with all of the key stakeholders to get approval of it and to get buy-in to how we're going to manage it and to move the effort along. Again, talking about not the what, but the how.
So but you guys frame up your own, you're essentially framing up your own organizational change management process.
Bingo.
Right? As opposed to having stakeholders or sponsors drive that. The team come up with this communication structure, you applied it, you got buy-in from them to do it, etc.
Yes, yeah, and so going back to here, so we talked about pivotal players. So these are the business units, and here are the functional units. So we had individuals who were closely aligned to these processes, who had deep functional business expertise, or they knew exactly how the processes ran, and they knew how dysfunctional they were. So we leveraged these folk to really drive the change, okay? So you can imagine risk, IT, ops, real estate. Corporate real estate is huge. HR, shared service finance, management reporting, etc. Behavior. Why did we select? And we handpicked these individuals. This is what we're looking for. Honest brokers of potentially multiple and conflicting points of view. Not everything's black and white. Negotiated with the ability to compromise, make trade-offs, problem-solving attitude coupled with thought leadership, willingness to take the enterprise view. And here is you have the corporate review board that focused on enterprise across the line of business, and you had the business unit, individual business unit. And again, here are some of the key elements of that structure. I'm running out of time here. So here is talking about gradual. What's the strategy over the long term? We had a first generation, near term. We had quick wins. So what we did was we started in December to implement this process with that structure, the infrastructure. And we had these workshops in which all the key leaders would participate, but on a weekly basis, we'd touch bases with those surrogates, or those individuals who knew the processes. And so over a period of 3 months, we'd go through, we'd get agreement on what were the problems. Let's whittle down what we wanted to solve, which problems, and get agreement to that. And then apply the screening, the rigor, et cetera, to the process. So the financial benefit that I showed you from 2.6 to 1.1, when we went to the operating committee, I went to the operating committee and we said, hey, this is what we're doing. Now, all of the operating committee members knew and they were engaged, but the CEO said, look, we have an earnings opportunity. Can you apply this in the next 2 months and come back with some savings? And that's what we did. So we got some of the benefit up front and then institutionalized it over the next 18 months. And the key to what American Express did and what we wanted to do was this. When you redeploy capital, you can take that, with that rigor and with that screening, you can redeploy that capital to higher growth initiatives and activities. That's the goal. And this is something I want to talk about, and I know there are a lot of change managers and organizations, et cetera. What we wanted to do and what we want was build an organization in which we were continually breaking the rules, and introducing change. This paradigm that we talked about and implemented was that we wanted to get the organization used to change, because so many of us are resistant to change. And as you introduce new change, when it comes to capabilities, when it comes to new knowledge, it only makes you stronger. So we wanted to implement this and instill this in the organizational DNA. I only have 5 minutes, and I want to just end with this and hopefully give you a few seconds for some questions. How do you all think an effort like this happened? And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking this question. How do you think?
I'm going to guess that was the hardest part of it.
Yes. But how do you think an effort like this happened?
Something bad. CEO says make it happen and follows up on it. Continues.
The CEO said we need this to happen. Would you believe that this was an effort that started from the ground up? The consultants who implement this at American Express, they came to me and they said, look, and I'm talking about, I want to end in talking about empowerment. And we were talking a little about this before. They came and said, well, we want to do some offshoring work with you guys. And they wanted me to introduce them to some people in the technology and ops area. And they flipped through it. They had this investment rationalization capability. I said, that looks interesting. Anyway, to make a long story short, I took it to the gentleman I was working for. I said, this is something we need to do. He says, you know what? I see it. From that point on, we agreed that we identified 30 leaders across the enterprise. 30. You go and sell them on it. But before we go and sell them on it, let's do a business case. So we evaluate all that work you saw about the portfolio. We had that in hand. And everybody's like, whoa. 4 months later, we had a meeting with that core group. We boiled it down to 15 people, and this project was born. From then, we engaged a number of the surrogates in this process, this change process. It was a transformation process, because everybody felt the pain. Everybody saw the value, and that's how this project was born. It was such a groundswell that everybody in the enterprise eventually was on the investment rationalization bandwagon. And this was a part of a previous discussion we were having in the other session, but I think too often as project managers, we look at the X and O's and the technical aspects of delivering and your professional expertise. I think project managers sit in a very important place in organizations. You see so much, you know so much. And feeling and believing that you're empowered and have the personal authority is so critical. And exerting that with your managers and those you support only adds incremental value to what you do on a day-to-day basis. So feel empowered. Feel the personal authority. Don't cross off and do what you're taught from a professional perspective, but go beyond. Exert some leadership. Thank you for your time.
Everybody enjoyed the session?
Yes.
Any questions before Joe skips away from us today?
So I real quick question. So this is all great and wonderful if you're at a level that you can effectuate some change at an organizational level. But from a PM perspective, I think we can all revert back to some times where we, like you said, we see what's going on in the project. We know the problems. We know what's going well. We know what's not going well. But a lot of times we kind of bump up into, well, you can only do so much, and you can only escalate so many times. How can you effectuate some of this change at a project level?
So I hear you. I've been in initiatives and in organizations, consulting and doing work. And to your point, I hear you. You'd be surprised how many project managers just do enough. When you sit down with your manager or whoever, sometimes they are so busy executing. If you say, hey, this is what I did, you know what? Have you considered this? And I know not all managers are receptive to that, but some are. If you continue to do that and show the extra effort and provide the extra insight, because sometimes they just don't know. And I think that's one piece is going the extra mile, but also once your influence, your sphere of influence across, you interact with others, sit down and talk to another manager who you may be supporting or, not directly, but you interact with. Sit down and talk to them about your ideas. Invite them to coffee. You would be surprised how little things like that go a long way in exerting influence. You'd be surprised. I've seen it happen over and over again. Any other questions?
If I could just add on to something like that. I recently retired from the defense industry, 30 years as a project and program manager. And one of the things that I found, and I feel like you're hitting your head up against the wall, is are you putting it in the perspective of whoever the decision maker is? What is the value proposition? Not what you want to accomplish, but are you phrasing it in a way that is meaningful to where that decision maker is? And because there's a number of times where I say, give me my money, I deserve my money, and when I rephrased it as, here is the value to the organization from that person's perspective, not how I see it, but from that person's perspective, it really went a long way in getting through those roadblocks. And sometimes there's conflict, and you say, okay, then you're right, we're not going to go any further, and maybe that's the time that the project should come to an end.
Right.
Stakeholder management, understanding the stakeholder, understanding the information. Well, thank you so much on behalf of PMI.
Oh, okay.
We'd like to thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here
Thank
today.
you. Thanks for having me.